Okay, now we're going to put together the tail transmission, or the tail, this is the boom support and tail transmission. Starts off with installing the 3mm lock nuts. I slid all 4 nylon lock nuts down over a small driver. Just going to get these set into the holes first. This makes life a little simpler. Okay, once we've got the nylon lock nuts in place, we're going to come back with 4 12mm, 3 by 12mm. These are the longer ones. These are going to come through the plastic housing. All you're doing is lightly installing these now. These have to stay loose because the tail boom still has to be installed. So I'm just going to run these in, but definitely do not bottom them out at this point. No thread lock on these because this is using a nylon lock nut, so that provides your mechanical locking force there. As a rule, you should not use thread lock or anything with a nylon lock nut because it can break down the nylon. Okay, so we got these parts ready. The rest of the tail assembly was already put together from the factory. This is going to install into the back of the airframe. And get mounted with three by 10mm bolts. Whole series of these. There should be a total of 8. These are going into metal. There's an aluminum spacer inside each of these bolt holes, so these will need thread lock, and we're going to put in 8 total. There's 1, 2 forward up here, up underneath the servo and up by the main gear. On the opposite side here, Alright, so we've got tail assembly installed. Next piece obviously is the tail boom once we start doing that setup. There's also a small round-headed bolt that goes around here to the right-hand side, comes in with a 2.5 with a 2mm driver back here. That's just going to get lightly threaded in for now. This is going to lock the tail boom in place later. I just set that in there so I don't lose that while we're building. This is assembling the tail shaft for the TREX550X. We're going to start off by just cleaning a spot on this. I typically use a degreaser like a brake cleaner. Make sure this tail transmission, tail drive shaft is super clean. We're going to slide the support bearing down over the shaft. And the key here is to get just a little off center. If we go dead center, we wind up potentially with a little harmonic vibration. If we can come a little off center, it will make it better. I'm using a thick CA. Gonna put just a little bit, make a little ring around this. Slide this bearing over it. Kind of rotate it as I go to make sure the bearing is in there. Move my CA out of the way and hit this with some accelerator. Just going to lock that bearing in place. Okay, make sure the bearing's nice and free. Good. We're going to slide the rubber bushing over. Okay, then I am going to put some tri-flow onto this. I'm going to run a little additional lubricant inside the tail tube itself. Slide these two pieces together. Once that's in a little ways, Align provides a plastic tube as part of this kit plastic tube slides in, and that's what you can use to center up the tail shaft. You're going to wind up with a little bit of the torque tube coming out both sides of the tail housing here. Okay, to install the tail shaft here, we're going to look for this slot, which fits to the left side of the airframe in the front. This is going to engage into the transmission here. I have in the back, out of frame here, I've made sure that I twisted the actual torque tube just a little bit to make sure the gears line up. Okay, what we're looking for is this hole has to eventually line up underneath this bolt. So we're going to have to come in a little further, and sometimes it's easier to remove or loosen the back two tail transmission bolts here. One side or the other, doesn't need both. Okay, that is in. It's not rotating because of there's a plastic arm, there's a plastic boss in here that engages with this part of the slot. Doesn't rotate. Come around here. My 2.5 for my 2mm driver. I'm going to back this out real quick. Make sure the hole's lined up underneath there. It is. The hole in the tail tube itself. Okay, that's going to prevent the tail from sliding out. Now I'll take my driver and take the power down a little bit because we're going into plastic, and I'm going to snug up the 4 pinch bolts. Now, since I took them out to make things slide together easier, I'm going to reinstall the 2 rear transmission bolts. Turn my driver back up to about 8. Thread lock. Okay, tail shaft and tail boom is installed.